Hello, there we go.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Thank you all for joining. I know it's late in the first day, but we're glad you could make it here. Thank you, Roma, for the intro. As she said, I'm Chang. I lead our gaming vertical here at Ava Labs. It's been a really fun ride. Was here last year, and just seeing the growth of the gaming ecosystem has been really fun. So we obviously announced a big deal with TSM a couple months ago, and we're honored that Dan here is here to talk a little bit about it, along with just esports in general. So maybe before we jump into the list of questions and we start, waxing poetic, Dan, maybe you can give an intro about yourself and TSM.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Dan Dinh. I am one of the co-founders of TSM, starting in gaming and esports in 2009. Little kid in college with a keyboard, mouse, and a dream. Didn't really expect to do much in gaming and esports, but there was this little game called League of Legends, 300 player base at the time. Very hard to get into the alpha. I somehow managed to get four beta keys or alpha keys, and jumped in and just kind of built myself up in the community. And it just started snowball. Started a little blog, a couple hundred readers the first day, grew it to 1,000, then 10,000, and it evolved over time. I don't know if you guys know the history of TSM, but TSM used to be called Team Solo Mid, and the website I started with was called solomid.net. 2009-ish grew that to, I think, about 5 million monthly active users before it evolved into Blitz, which is about 10 million monthly. And then along that journey, we're like, oh, wow, we have this really powerful media asset. How do we continue marketing it? And we're like, oh, well, Andy and I, my co-founder, we just played tons of League of Legends. He was ranked 1, I was ranked 2, and we flipped back and forth. And we're like, you know what? We should start an esports team. And, we get to travel around the world, play video games professionally, and we can market the website. And so started TSM right around 2010 after the website came out. Never expected to make money off of it. The economics of it was, you fly to a tournament, it's $10,000 if you take first place. You're flying 5 dudes, paying for hotel, food for 4 days. You're in the whole 20. So if you take first place, you're losing $10,000. But it was more of hey, I want to travel the world, play video games, and see how I stack up against each other. With the advent of streaming and just basically sponsorship, that space just grew and grew and grew from losing 10,000 a tournament to oh wow, actually there's something more to this. And so I've been working on both the content side and the esports side since 2009, and got really deep into Web3, and that's what brought me here.
Cool, yeah. I think we have both known each other for a long time because we came up in esports, and you've seen this massive growth, and then as of recent, there's been a lot of contraction, right? Originally, there was a ton of money flowing into the space. Publishers were all doing franchise leagues. You had high net worth individuals, family offices, VC, sports teams all buying into it, and then you've seen with certain team stock prices and layoffs and stuff like that, and TSM is also no stranger. So can you give us a quick overview on what's going on in the esports space right now? Where do you see the opportunity for these teams? TSM is a household name, one of the largest esports orgs in the world. How are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you guys a little bit of a history and context, right? If you're thinking about it, back in 2009, 2010, I think up to 2011 and 12, esports teams were trading at $20,000 for a team. And it was one of the best trades in terms of investment, and also one of the best trades in terms of marketing. I remember I was going out and looking for sponsors, and I was going to Astro Gaming. I was like, hey guys, we have millions of users on our YouTube videos and tens of thousands of people watching us on stream. Can you give us free gear? I'll wear it and I'll market it. And they're like, no. Our first sponsor was for $50,000 a year. And you see brands like HyperX and Logitech that didn't have an esports division growing to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue per year, purely off of esports. And so it was one of the best trades in 2010, 11, 12 that nobody really thought about or heard about. And so that was when, esports and gaming was going through hyper growth. And it was just starting to break into mainstream. And I think right around then, that's kind of when it flipped over and people were like, oh, wow, there's something here. And people were really excited about. And I think people got a little bit too excited. Tons of VCs started coming in. You have a mix of it used to be all legacy team, and it became mostly newer VC-backed team with a few legacy team. And what you end up having is you have these new esports team come in with tens of millions of dollars in investment. And esports went from hey, how do I run a business profitably? How do I make money every year and make really sound financial decision to newer teams coming in and say, hey, I have this big chunk of money. How do I grab market share? How do I spend to get the best talent? And so you have a mix of legacy team where they're like, hey, I have to balance being profitable and being sustainable with, how do I keep up in spending against other teams that are buying all my talent, right? It was, it happened to us, right? Every time one of our contract renew, our players come to us, is like, hey, this team that just raised $50 million wants to 10x my salary, are you gonna match? And so we're like, ooh, it doesn't make sense. And so what you saw with us is we would bring in a talent, never heard of him before, and he pops off. He's at 5 million followers, and then he leaves, and our fan base is like, shoot, why didn't you try and keep him? I'm like, I can't really say who or why or how. Is oh no, we just decided to part ways, but the reality is everybody was really excited, a little too excited, and newer teams needed to build an audience. You fast forward that to 2022, 2023, and you're starting to see hey, there's a little bit of a contraction happening because the business model was how do I fundraise for growth? Let's figure out profitability later. And I actually think that that's a good strategy. You just need to rewind that a little bit and say, hey, let's try and figure out profitability in 2018 versus 2023 when things contract a little too far. And so given that, I truly believe that esports and gaming is very powerful. It's going to continue to grow. When you think about the cohorts of audience, right? When I started in esports and gaming, it's basically, kids 15 to 23. You fast forward it 10 years, you have a new cohort. It actually gets a little younger. It gets 8 to 30. We haven't filled that age range of hey, what does it look like if a kid at 4 to 60 fills in? So I truly believe, give it 20, 30 years, the audience is gonna 5, 10x. And monetization is going to catch up. But I think currently in its given form, spending needs to kind of come down a little bit, be a little bit more sustainable, but going to be extremely powerful in 5, 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point, right? Because similar to traditional tech and consumer apps, it's when you raise money, you either need to show this insane user growth or the revenue growth. And what you're saying is esports was growing, but started plateauing, right? And then you kind of got to show the revenue, which I think a lot of these teams are figuring out. Yeah,
well, I think esports hasn't really plateaued. What happened is spending has contracted, right? I think investments and VCs have no appetite for esports right now. And so there's just less money coming into the ecosystem. And so teams just can't be as frivolous. There's no more, I'm going to spend $1 million on this party that gets 10,000 people's eyeballs. That shouldn't have flied, and it definitely doesn't fly anymore. I think what happens is the money is not coming in, but I don't think that the audience is plateauing. There's always a lag in terms of revenue and audience growth, right? When you think about esports team, you go out, you sign this 5-year deal with a sponsor for $1 million. Your audience grows 10x over that 5 years. They're not going to say, hey, I signed this deal with 1 million followers. Now you have 10. Next year, I'm going to pay you 10. They're going to say, hey, I'm going to wait for the 5-year contract to expire, and then we're going to bump you up 30%. So sponsorship growth generally grows pretty linearly, while the audience is pretty exponential. And so it takes time to catch up. And so you can't spend exponentially.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's transition over to the Web3 side a little bit. I think we talk to a lot of esports teams, right?
Yeah.
Who are looking to do things in Web3. And I think the vast majority of them wanted to throw the Avalanche logo on their jersey and call it a day, right? Similar to like a lot of these, let's call them centralized exchange deals that a lot of these guys had, right? You guys had one too. But what I loved about working with you, your brother, and the team is that you guys had this like 360 vision of really how to like ultimately bring users on chain, not just get exposure for the logo. So can you talk about, in your words, kind of this deal, like why Avalanche, and what you guys are building, and why people should be excited?
Yeah. So the thing for me and Andy is I think crypto and Web3 is in our DNA. We started, like I was mining Bitcoin in 2011. I've gone through, basically all you have is just a token to basically now you have contracts on chain where you can do really, really cool stuff. Got much deeper during, DeFi summer. And so like we understand Web3, I feel like a lot more than other esports team. And so that allows us to think outside the box more than just like, hey, what does it look like if we, slap, a logo on our jersey? Our goal is we're very bullish in Web3. We think that there's a lot of application that needs to be built out. If you look at the internet, when everybody was hyping up the internet in the early 2000s, they said, hey, the future of communication and learning is on the internet. You're going to be able to go online, and it's going to be like a bookstore with a storage of knowledge, and everybody kind of like laughed at you. And I think that was Web3 like 3-4 years ago. And we're starting to see that change. And we wanted to be a part of Web3 and its legacy and its history, like the internet and how it was impactful in the early 2000s. And so we really put our heads together and said, hey, like what can we do in Web3? How can we touch it authentically? Especially given our audience, which is really, really discerning. I say gamers is the most likely audience to interface with Web3. But they're also going to be the first to call your bullshit, right? You think about like gaming, there's soft currency in gaming already. People are already used to like buying and selling and trading with like digital currency. I was selling WoW Gold when I was in college, to buy books and, like and whatnots. And so we're thinking, I think the future of Web3 has to be authentic if you're going to onboard a lot of people. And so we thought about like, hey, what type of asset do we have, and like what does it make sense? And so through the deal with Avalanche, what we have is we have this app called like Blitz app. It touches over 10 million users, about 3-point-something million dailies. And we're like, okay, what we're already thinking about on Blitz app is like, hey, how do we...
Sorry, hold on one second. Just for the audience, Blitz is a coaching tool, right? It sits in the background on your PC while you play League, Counter-Strike, Apex, Valorant, and it gives you like insights and stats, right? Yeah. Continue.
Yeah, so we have this app that teaches you how to play League of Legends and Valorant, and it's basically our core audience. And we're like, okay, how do you want to interface with our audience, and how does it make sense to interface with it using Web3? We were already building out basically like loyalty programs and rewards tools and insight, and trying to figure out like, hey, which one of our audience is valuable? How do we reward them, and how do we incentivize them to use it better? And we thought, oh wow, this is a perfect application for Web3. And so like some of the earliest integration, and there's a lot of other things that we're going to build that we're not going to talk about it until we get closer to like building it and launching it. But working with Avalanche, it was a really, really good experience, because they're able to make what we want to do a little bit more clear in terms of like, hey, what can we do? How can we execute it? And how can we utilize Subnet to accomplish that vision? Some of the earliest application would be like, hey, how does it look like if we create utility for Web3 assets in digital currency? So what we would like to do is what does it look like if I have AVAX token, convert it to bolts on the Blitz app, use bolts on the Blitz app to go out and say, hey, I'm going to purchase stuff on Grubhub. I'm going to purchase a skin in League of Legends. I'm going to be able to drop it in my account. I'm going to be able to drop it into my friend's account. So some early applications of what we want to do, and there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's what we were impressed with as well, that, you know, effectively right now there's some pretty cool stuff you can do, like, like you could enter competitions, right, and,
Yep.
and win currency and stuff like that. But there's so much more in terms of like a passport into all gaming and all things, you know, in consideration there. You guys are working on some other Web3 gaming stuff. Do you want to talk about some of that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. And like Ed said, TSM at its core and DNA is we're just really excited and very bullish on Web3. One of our initiative in late 21, 22 is like, what's a really good use case or an application for Web3? And we thought, okay, you know, I think at the time the buzzword was like metaverse, Web3 gaming, and we put our brains together and said, hey, what does it look like to build a metaverse gaming? And what we ultimately came to is like, hey, actually, you don't start off as a metaverse. You build something that's compelling with an interesting game loop that gets people to fall in love with the game and the IP around it. That's how you build a metaverse. And so we said, hey, what does it look like if TSM were to build a game studio? And so in 2022, we started a little game studio. I think I just started talking about it actually publicly right around GDC. It's called Project Kaizen. High level, it's a top-down battle royale extraction-based game, utilizing blockchain technology for identity and digital asset. You know, like one of the friction that I had in traditional Web2 gaming, I remember I was playing World of Warcraft, and I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble, but I was trying to sell my WoW account, and I had so much friction around that, and we thought, what does it look like if we open up that ecosystem and say, we're not gonna, you know, block transactions between users. We're gonna open up the economy and make it more free-flowing. Put a lot of thought into it, have a lot of opinions, but yeah, we started a Web3 game studio, and we're trying to, you know, exercise in the Web3 space in as many touch points as possible. Cool.
Obviously, a lot of the folks in this room are very interested in Web3 gaming. They're building games. They've launched games. You know, TSM as an esports org, and most esports orgs, they tend to have teams in games that are obviously very well known, right? Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Fortnite. These are games with tens of millions of MAUs. Do you see a path there, like one day, like maybe next year, 2 years from now, we're sitting here and TSM has, you know, like teams in Web3 games? Have you seen any games that you're pretty excited about that could be esports titles?
Yeah, so I think like there is definitely a future in Web3 gaming. I think over the next 5, 7, 10 years, you're gonna see mega studios popping up in each segment of Web3 gaming. You're gonna have like the lo-fi arcade game to like the mid-fi to like the AAA. I think incentives weren't aligned correctly in 21, 22, and so it does push it back a few years. And just inherently the nature of video games, it takes 7 years to make something truly compelling. And so I think in the horizon of like another 5 years, you're gonna see mega games pop up on Web3. And I think given like what Web3 technology can do is you know, you can facilitate and automate like basically prize pools and payouts and incentive structures, and you know, like you can have tournaments and just like one of my biggest things is I used to be a professional gamer, and when I played in tournaments, I would win and they say, hey, you won $10,000, and then sometimes you get paid out the next day, the next week, the next month, in 6 months. Sometimes you track them down over a year, and I think like that's a really good use case for blockchain technology that can really, you know, make it really powerful.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the time we had. We could go on for a long time, but Dan's going to be here all week too if you guys see him and want to chat esports and gaming. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.